Good evening. It is 7:01 p.m. on Monday, June 15th, 2020, and I call to order this regular meeting of the Richfield School Board. Attending this evening's virtual board meeting are board members Paula Cole, Christine Malik, Tim Paulus, Allegra Smishek, and Peter Tensing, and I am Crystal Brackey. We are also joined by Superintendent Unowski and several district staff members who you will hear from later in the agenda. This meeting is taking place virtually as allowed by Minnesota State Statute 13D.021 in light of the peacetime state of emergency declared by Governor Walz due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And just a note on that front, I anticipate that we will continue to meet virtually until either the state of emergency has ended or until we receive updated guidance from public health officials about the safety of in-person gatherings. So for now, the peacetime state of emergency in Minnesota has been extended through July 13th, and guidance continues to discourage gatherings of more than 10. And so we will continue to meet online for the time being and certainly keep everyone updated as we learn more. Richfield Public Schools' mission statement is that we strive to inspire and empower each individual to learn, grow, and excel. And that is especially important for us to keep at the center of our meeting as we do our work together from afar. So just want to appreciate and welcome anyone watching this meeting live or in the future on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. So with that, our first item of business this evening is to approve the agenda before us. As this is a routine business item, I will not individually call on board members, but rather just pause for a moment and do an open ask for any comments or questions related to the agenda. Seeing and hearing none, is anyone prepared to move the agenda as presented?
I'll move the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Mr. Tensing and a second by Ms. Cole. Any final discussion? And as is part of the statute for virtual meetings, every vote will be a roll call vote that will be conducted by our board clerk, Christine Malik.
Okay, so we'll start with Ms. Cole.
Aye.
Mr. Paulus.
Aye.
Ms. Smishek.
Aye.
Mr. Tensing.
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brackey.
Aye. The agenda is approved. We now move into the information and proposals non-action items section of the agenda. I received one request for public comment this evening and will read the written statement provided by a member of our Richfield Public Schools community, Lori Humiston. So this is Lori's words. I wanted to thank the school board, the district administration, the teachers, counselors, and staff for the creativity and commitment to robust education during the pandemic restrictions. I am hoping with the state's support, the district will be allowed and encouraged to show the same creativity with the plan for this fall. Educational rigor is important to our kids, but I would argue just as important is their emotional and physical health. For many, this is accomplished through activity participation. I would like to advocate for a hybrid model where face-to-face participation is encouraged in sports, music, and activities, as well as in material and culinary arts, combined with a distance learning model in more didactic classes. I would also like to request consideration to develop a plan for socially distant pods of elementary age kids in buildings they may not be completely full if secondary kids are doing a hybrid learning model. In the end, our kids' social and emotional health is just as important as their academics, and activity participation plays a strong role to support those needs. Thank you for the opportunity to share these ideas and for all you do for our kids and community. Sincerely, Lori Humiston, who is a parent to 2 high school students. So thank you to Lori for requesting time to share these thoughts with the board and Richfield community. And just want to note, I believe that there will be a brief update related to these decisions around schooling in the fall later in the meeting during our legislative update. And of course, we will be communicating frequently with our community over the summer as we know more. So also as a reminder, in these virtual meetings, I will work with anyone who wishes to provide public comment to do so either via written statement, as Lori did this evening, audio file, or video message. The next opportunity for public comment will be at either our June 29th or July 13th board meetings. Typically, we only do public comment at one meeting a month, but since we added a second June meeting and traditionally public comment is at the second meeting of the month, I think it makes sense to be generous and provide time for anyone who wishes to address the board at our next meeting, as well as our only meeting for the month of July. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Superintendent Yanofsky to begin the superintendent update this evening.
All right, thank you, Chair Brackey. We actually have two presentations this evening. One, a strategic planning update, and two, a school climate and culture survey update. Looks like Scott has that queued up, so as soon as that starts going, and I will continue talking.
This is Superintendent Steve Yanofsky. Welcome to Strategic Planning 2020 through 2025. This will be our final update prior to creating a draft strategic plan. Our 2020 through 2025 strategic plan has been titled Richfield Realized. We will strive to realize our aspirations and to ensure that our students, families, staff, and community can realize their dreams. We began back in December with a review of our current plan along with our measures from our vision cards. We have taken input from over 1,000 stakeholders, then had nearly 500 participate in the prioritization process. Today, we share priorities before gaining board feedback and turning our plan into a written draft. As we move forward, our mission remains the same. Richfield Public Schools inspires and empowers each individual to learn, grow, and excel. Our Richfield brand acknowledges that we are a real and caring community, rich in diversity and relationships. We offer personalized learning for each student, rich opportunities, inspiring possibilities through academics, arts, and a wide range of programming. And we work toward innovation and action, transforming the way we teach and redefining school. None of this could be more relevant as we have been educating in a distance model and completely using different models for education during COVID-19. As we moved our planning process into prioritization, we had 485 respondents. I also want to specifically acknowledge the efforts of our outreach workers who used the phone and distance methods to complete over 100 prioritization activities with our Spanish and second language families. This work has led us to priorities for strategic focus. In academics, we will work to close the gap, maintaining small class sizes, supporting biliteracy, and expanding course offerings while supporting post-secondary options for all students. In communications and marketing, we'll continue to improve our reputation, improve our family communication, and increase our enrollment, all through better marketing and public relations strategies. In our climate and culture, we will work to improve student behavior, increase our student supports and our parent involvement, and increase our school pride while truly supporting and celebrating the diversity in our schools. Our business models will keep improving as we improve our staff hiring and support processes, continue our facility improvement processes, and use environmentally friendly practices. We'll maintain our improvements in student meals and remain fiscally accountable and transparent. Our activities will expand in variety while increasing participation and increasing the attendance of students and families at events and performances. Finally, we will improve and increase our community partnerships, creating a structured volunteer program and providing increased parenting classes and activities for families. With COVID-19, our overall process is slightly behind schedule, but we are in position to craft our finalized plan this summer. Our next steps are to review this prioritized list with the school board for affirmation or refining of our priorities. Then we will work with our leadership to create a strategic plan draft to share with the community. At this time, I'll open things up for questions or feedback.
Before I do just that, so a couple of points I just want to hit. So what you saw was in order the prioritization of students, families, staff who completed our prioritization activities. And so there was a couple things I wanted to roll out to the board today. One, I wanted you to see it. So you'd have a time to read, review, and digest. I am not needing full feedback today. I certainly am hoping for full feedback by the end of June. So giving us till the end of the month. And so I'm hoping to have board members read, review our strategic plan priorities and see if there are things missing or things that we need to make sure that we add into that draft. The other component I want to acknowledge is we have not fully integrated distance learning into our strategic plan because that came out in between our strategic planning input, our prioritization, and then COVID hitting. And so what we also know is we're going to need to examine the outcome for distance learning to see where we would need to put in some additional priorities or some things to look at in that area. Because we have had COVID, we are slightly behind schedule. Had we not been interrupted, I anticipated presenting a draft today. But what we wanted to do was share priorities, have the board at least a couple of weeks to give feedback and responses. And then during that first 2 weeks of July, prior to our July 13th board meeting, begin and craft that draft to then share a draft strategic plan with the board for, again, affirmation or feedback prior to rolling that out as a draft to the community, prior to finalizing before school starts. So what I'm hoping for from board members is to take some time to be able to review and to be able to give feedback on priorities. Are there things missing or are there things that need to be added? With that, I will turn it over to Crystal to determine what steps are next in terms of questions.
Thank you. So as is typical now for us, what we're going to do is a round where each board member will have a time to share any questions or comments, and they will pass the microphone on to the next board member in alphabetical order once they are done. So Paula Cole is up first.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and the slides. I actually got the opportunity to play a little game with the priority list when I attended the community education meeting and had the opportunity to discuss a lot of these and kind of shuffle them around. And I'm happy to see a lot of the same priorities that we've found made it to the very top of the list. And it makes more sense now here than it did then, I have to say, because there were more like lines, like topic and bullet points and whatnot. But anyway, the only question I have at the moment is in the Richfield Realized Academics. There is the last bullet is calling for students learning about post-secondary options, including advisory days. I just want to know, I know that the students last year when I visited the presentations, they were very interested in the testing and preparation and advisory, and I'd like to know how that fits into this, if at all, just making sure that it's there, because I know it was a priority at the high school and also from our student reps.
Yes, as you point out, that is something to add. I mean, I think that is one of the strategies to make sure our students learn about post-secondary options. So I will note that down to put into that revised prioritized draft, because I would agree that is something our students definitely pointed out. And that is appreciated feedback and input.
Thank you. That's all I have for now. It's a lot to bite. Ms. Malek.
Thank you. It is a lot. I also was able to participate in Safe and Supportive Schools when that group went through, and it was interesting because we all participated, but the board members that were there and the admin team people that were there had a slightly different perspective than the families who were represented. So we talked a little bit about that and about making sure that the families and the other people participating in the committee were heard. I'm curious first about how many committees actually got to go through this? How much community input did we have in the prioritization process?
So each of our committees that met. I know Activities Advisory participated in this. I believe Fiscal Advisory Committee participated in this. I believe Safe and Supportive Schools and a wide range of our committees did. We had, I believe, around 100 to 150 staff members, and I would have to go back because we did not ask for that specific data. But I believe around 150 of them were done internally on RPS computers, which means that about 2/3 of the overall feedback, I believe, came from outside, meaning students or parents.
Okay.
Or committees.
All right. And I think the other things that I have are like very detailed, and I just want to take some time to look through everything else. So I think that is enough for right now. Mr. Paulus.
Thank you, Christine. On just to work backwards, the business and operations, I think I would just settle to know that if whatever we have for parent and community interface like fee pay isn't dreadful, that would be a market improvement, right? I mean, and I know that we buy in a marketplace. It's become apparent to me that the marketplace of public school focused software packages are challenged. We don't have necessarily we're bound to choose what is most cost effective, and the markets that provide to us seem to not always be what you would encounter in a private commercial enterprise, and so it's tough. It's one of the challenges we have. So any improvement there would be welcome. A few others, speaking to activities, post-secondary options, and course offerings, and I think a lot of this has one aspect in common, and that is sort of guidance in advising the students the power and opportunities they have within their control. And it's an area where I think we have a lot of growth still. When it comes to course offerings, when we went to the 7-period day, we have an opportunity to grow all kinds of electives, and they could be student driven. But by the time the students learn the ropes, they might have gone through 2 years of high school. And then they have about a month and a half of their junior year to get a course approved for their senior year, just given the process we have for course approval. And so, the earlier we can let them know that they have power, that our students have power to drive what is offered for courses, provided they can get faculty support, and as well as for activities and things that, whether they be leisure, game, focused on an event or a philosophy or something like that. There's all kinds of things that can be student driven and student focused if they understand the power they have. And so I think a lot of it does come back to guidance and advising the students how much is in their hands as early as possible, with a lot of clarity and a lot of reminders. So that's just input from me. I think those items within the goals and broad headings are great, but that was my takeaway from them, and that's all I have. I'll pass to Ms. Smishek.
Thanks, Tim. My question is regarding some of the specific language used in the document. Was there an effort to keep the same language given in the feedback? I'm thinking specifically of like achievement gap. Under climate, there's a mention of improving student behavior, but the examples given are more about adult behavior. So things like, could you give me a little background on the specific language used?
Yes, so at present, we have not, other than removing offensive things, we have not removed the language utilized by our parents, our students, our staff as the input came in. And so what we're trying to do is gather input, and then this would become, from my perspective, by July 13th, a linguistically appropriate document that would then be ran by you all again prior to rolling out a draft to the community. I think it's important that we get an actual draft, get feedback from you all, then we get an actual draft out to the community, get feedback, and then we finalize. So hope that helps. We didn't change terminology, again, unless it was openly offensive.
And I appreciate that because I think it's important to have like the original intended language. So thank you. Director Tenzing.
Okay, pardon me. To me, the most important thing really comes in the mission statement, which is that student-centered focus. And I guess that's just the main thing that I'm going to be looking for as we kind of continue to flesh this out, is what are the ways that we sort of operationalize a focus on students as being at the center of our work. So yeah, I'm tending to think about it at that level right now, and then we'll be looking forward to seeing more details and sort of seeing how we operationalize that focus.
I would agree with that. Some examples of things already happening are along those lines, because that theme was very clear. You know, our middle school is already working on student voice and earlier exposure and training to how do you advocate for yourself and how do you engage your voice in your learning and in our district, and really looking at operationalizing some of the things that we've been looking at long term, but also reinforcing our admin and management team from some of the broad ideas in here, even before we make it a strategic plan. So I look forward to that too.
Yep. So thank you very much. I will go ahead and pass it back to Crystal Brocky.
Thank you. I think that there are just two overarching things that are on my mind. One is, I think, the challenge of how to get student perspective on this before we finalize, given the timing. And I understand why the timing is what it is, given the way the school year very unexpectedly changed. But it feels a little bit uneasy to potentially finalize it before we get another round of discussion or input from students, which maybe connects to the second point, which is I think I would just love to see when we come back to this at our next meeting, what our outreach plan is going to look like to get input from people, given that we're trying to finalize this over the summer months when we know it is challenging to connect and to ask people for time and thought. And so if we have a really robust outreach plan that includes students, I think that would be great. And I would feel probably more confident about trying to finalize it before school actually comes back in the fall, whatever form it may take.
So we will have to play that one by ear a little bit. Obviously, we have a lot of our staff not working over the summer. We do have a 3-week window from July 13th to the end of July, ironically, right when our next board meeting is, where I can get board input and finalize that draft feedback. We will have students in between July 13th and July 31st, I believe, is the final date of summer school. So that is an option to get input from some of our students most effectively. But if board feedback and guidance is that we should wait until October or November to finalize things, we can certainly do that as we look to get feedback. And so we'll kind of work our way through and determine what the best way to move forward is as we keep going through the summer.
Thank you. I would love to hear any other board member perspectives. I think I'm feeling a little uneasy about potentially trying to finalize over the summer without being able to really know that we're reaching the broad community in the way that I think we always aspire to, especially when we're making decisions of this level of importance for the next 5 years of the district and what we're really going to be putting our stakes in to say this is what we're focused on. So I'd love to hear any other thoughts on that. And with that, actually, it's a good opportunity to open it back up to see if there are any final questions or comments that other members of the board would like to share before we move on to the next topic.
So in light of what you were just talking about, Crystal, I think, we really did get a lot of feedback that I think would be helpful and applicable to this from our high school students in their social studies presentations. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of the things that they talked about that really relate to what we've already got here, but they really brought in a lot of ideas and some other things that we could really focus on and add to this. I think if we put those together with what we have here, I think that would be a good way to bring in some student voice. And those are seniors who were at the school for, at the high school for 4 years. They've lived that high school life. And I think they would be very knowledgeable on the things that need to happen there. Of course, that's not the entire district, but I think at least in the things that are applicable to the high school, I think that could be very helpful for us.
Yeah, and I guess that I would just want to echo the point that Crystal made relative to the timing, and that and the superintendent has sort of acknowledged that we don't necessarily need to have any sense of urgency, that it's going to be more worthwhile for us to take our time and get it right. And so I would prioritize getting that broad feedback and that student voice. I would prioritize that over rapid completion.
I'd also like to see a way that, and I know now that we're distancing is hard, but a way to present it to the community so that the community, can give feedback, because it's not just, the high school, so that parents can weigh into how basically just looking for those little things that we inside don't see, because we cannot see it all the time, but maybe, extra set of eyes from our families and community members. I don't know, virtual symposium, I don't know, something where we could hear other things.
Okay. Any other final comments? Doesn't look like it. Thank you. I expect we will get another update from the superintendent on what to expect coming next.
Yes, so to summarize really quickly, we will gather any additional board feedback over the next couple weeks, come back with a draft on the 13th of July, and then we will look at what to do from there, and we'll do some reflection over the next month. One of the things that makes me even more comfortable waiting is we obviously will be full-fledged into planning for the fall over this summer. And so there are going to be some things that would sidetrack us from some of the things we'd be working on in our strategic plan, at least at this time anyways. So it does definitely, under COVID-19, make some additional sense on top of gathering feedback and input to take our time with this and to have this last into the fall a little bit. So we'll reflect on that. I'll gather some additional input, reflect, and create a draft, and we'll go from there. Transitioning us into our next presentation, which is a school climate survey presentation. And so we had done a school climate survey in November, which may seem like a very long time ago, but we actually only had results in February, give or take, and given time frames and business, we weren't able to give this presentation earlier. So Christina Gonzalez is here with us tonight and is auto presenting. As soon as that tape starts, she will be going.
Today we'll be discussing and sharing information related to the school climate survey that was administered this school year. A few things, we had some pretty critical learnings around the administration, how we administered it. Secondary to the completion of the school climate survey, we were able to share this data with our principals and building leaders, disaggregated by building and shared across multiple teams within buildings, their ILT, their social emotional learning committees. We utilized this data most recently in our management team PD to build social emotional learning and SEL planning for next year. And this data was also utilized to highlight needs for this previous school year. So it's a new tool. We learned a lot. The survey was originally developed in a Word document and then administered and data housed within Qualtrics. So learning and growth across as we engaged in this work. So for the Richfield School Climate Survey, the survey questions were developed by school administrators, cabinet folk, district folk, and then vetted and reviewed by our High School Safe and Supportive Schools Committee. They were all administered online and for students during the school day, and then communication was sent out to parents and guardians via email, Blackboard, and outreach from staff. The survey was available in both English and Spanish, And for elementary students, icons were utilized, pictures essentially, to ensure that they were developmentally appropriate. Surveys were completed for second grade, third, fourth, and fifth. So kindergartners and first graders didn't complete the survey. Lastly, it's important to note that all data was utilized and tracked, even for surveys that were incomplete. For our parents and guardians, we received 517 responses. 27% of those parents and guardians identified as Hispanic or Latino, 9% of our parents and guardians identified as Black, 5% of our parents and guardians identified as multiracial, 4% Asian, 4% American Indian, and then 51% of the respondents of parents and guardians identified as white. In way of parent and guardian responses, 75% agree or strongly agree that school is preparing their child well for next school year, and 77% believe that the approach to discipline works well for their child. 83% agree or strongly agree that their child feel that they fit in and belong at school. 92% agree or strongly agree that the school is a good fit with their child's cultural background. And then 88% agree or strongly agree that activities offered are a good match with their child's interests. 1,064 elementary students completed the survey. In way of racial identity, 24% of those students that completed it in elementary identified as Hispanic or Latino, 21% identified as multiracial, 13% identified as Black, 6% identified as American Indian, 4% as Asian, 32% of the students that completed the surveys identified. In FAR responses, for school climate for elementary students, 75% agree or strongly agree that school feels like a positive place. It's important to note that students who identified as non-binary agreed less with all of the school climate questions. So in disaggregating that data, they had agreed less. 74% agree or strongly agree that adults at school understand them, and 78% agree or strongly agree that adults are there for them. Again, non-binary students agreed less across this. In way of school safety, nearly 80% of students feel safe at school and feel respected by others. However, 52% of all students and only 22% of non-binary students agreed that people are respectful to one another. In way of classroom and student relationships for elementary students, 71% would be excited to have the same teacher again, and 90% agree or strongly agree that my teacher encourages me to do my best. For secondary students, grades 6 through 12, 1,887 responses were completed. 29% of the students that completed at the secondary level identified as Hispanic or Latino, 12% identified as multiracial, 15% identified as Black, 4% as American Indian, 6% Asian, and 34% identified as white. In way of school climate, 66% agreed or strongly agreed that school feels like a positive place. However, important to note that students who identified as non-binary agreed less with all the school climate questions. 57% agree or strongly agree that adults at school understand them, and 72% agree or disagree or strongly agree that they receive the support they need from adults at their school. 41% of non-binary students and 55% of multiracial students feel respected by other students. In way of school safety, 74% feel safe at school, 66% of students feel respected by other students. However, it's important to note that 41% of all students and only 22% of non-binary students agreed that people are respectful to one another. 57% of students would be excited to have the same teacher again, and 82% agree or strongly agree that their teacher encourages them to do their best. For staff survey completions, 320 staff surveys were completed. Around school climate, you'll see the breakdown here by school on the left, the percentage of completed surveys, and then you'll see on the right the number of years within Richfield Public Schools and the percent completed there. I'll give you about 3 seconds to look at those two data points. In way of school climate, by staff report, 83% agree or strongly agree that they feel enthused and energized working in their school, and 75% agree or strongly agree that the work environment is positive. 74% have a variety of strategies and resources for supporting students in social emotional learning. 90% know who to contact if they have a kiddo that's struggling with behavior in their class. 85% agree or strongly agree that the relationship between teachers and students is respectful. and also that most days students are enthusiastic about being in school. In way of teacher and staff and administrative relationships with administration, 65% agree or strongly agree that there's a high level of trust between administration and staff. 83% are confident that school admin has the best interest of students, teachers, and staff in mind. 82% of staff agree or strongly agree that school administration establish a positive culture for their school. 74% agree or strongly agree that administration clearly communicate important info to staff. To sum up, this has been a really powerful learning opportunity for us in meeting the needs in a timely, appropriate, culturally relevant, identity-informed way. We will be administering school climate surveys now on an annual basis. We use other data related to student experiences, such as Minnesota Student Survey data, as behavior reports, and all of the data we collect related to safe and supportive schools. So in closing, these are all of our children. We will all profit by or pay for all of what they become. I'll be available for live conversation or questions after this presentation. Thanks, folks. Hi, everybody. This is Christina. So quickly, I'm good to go. Just to give a quick summary. We picked out critical points related to the data and information that we shared and where we were able to compile. To just reiterate, the SEL work this year was pretty, I would say, quite deep and quite broad. We, at the high school and both secondaries, between 6th grade and 13 plus, so I like to include the folks at RSEP, Tier 1 SEL school-wide expectations were built much more solidly with building input, student input, and staff and leadership input. So the high school started their school-wide expectations with pride. They built it in with their instructional leadership team. RSEP began groups and circles secondary to both this data and the building of SEL work plans in the summer prior to school starting in the fall. We also, for the first year with full fidelity, have delivered second step curriculum at all of our elementaries, and we are fully ISHE compliant, which is our sexual health compliance standards for K-5. So all of our K-5 students received educationally and developmentally appropriate sexual health curriculum with parents consenting to that in a written form. Let's see what else. The number of student engagement specialists at both Sheridan and RDLS engaged in growth mindset groups. So pushing into student classrooms and teaching kids about their amazing brains and how they can grow and they're flexible and plastic. And at Sheridan Hills, they started year 3 of conscious discipline, moving slowly and real intentionally with concepts related to conscious discipline, starting with the skill of composure, which is about the grown-ups. Taking a deep breath, understanding where working and engaging with students is hard. And for the 3rd year, this is all under Nancy's direction, 100% of our classrooms have a safe space in year 3. So this last school year, 100% of the classrooms at Sheridan Hills has a safe space for kids to be able to go and regulate or co-regulate with an adult instead of being sent out of the classroom as an initial attempt. We will be exploring conscious discipline district-wide and began launching that exploratory work and getting buy-in and sharing its power at the management team PD this past week. Aside from that, I'd love for Mary to add if I'm missing anything. This is all work, obviously, that is under the direction and leadership of Mary that I get to co-lead and co-support with her. So, Mary, anything else you'd like to add? Or even Dr. Daniel, since you're steeped in this work as well?
No, I think that the conscious discipline, I do want to reiterate that that's going to be something that we will be rolling out over the next couple of years. Next year will be just initial. It's about getting our adults all in line with how we engage with our learners when things become unexpected and they demonstrate behaviors that are unexpected. So we will be working with our administrative partners and each of the buildings to come up with a plan for rolling that out consistently across all of our schools over the next couple of years. And the work, all of the principals have been trained on how they can disaggregate their data from Qualtrics on the school climate survey. It was a big learning curve for us as we learned how to use this tool. So I'm confident that next year it will go a little quicker and a little more smoothly. So we'd welcome questions.
Thanks to you both. Christina, thanks for the video and for what you have shared again this evening. And before we move into the board member question and comments from the survey and presentation specifically, I also just wanted to touch on a related issue that wasn't addressed in these survey questions and share with people that we are in the process of discussing our use of student resource officers at Richfield Middle School and Richfield High School. I know I have received some questions about that in recent weeks, and so I wanted to make sure that I shared here that our building leaders are doing work to provide their assessment of the impact of having school resource officers at those two sites. And we are also in the process of seeking student perspective and experience, which we have long prioritized as a key part of any decision-making process in our district. So wanted to say a special thank you to our student board members from this past school year for already sharing their thoughts with me after I got in touch with them a few weeks back. And so I wanted to give this context here before we went into additional comments or questions, because I know it's on people's minds, but it isn't on the agenda tonight for a full discussion. And I anticipate we will have a formal board discussion on June 29th, so at our next meeting, and just want to make sure people know that we are going to clearly indicate that on the agenda in advance and are looking forward to that conversation. So with that, we will move into board member time for questions or comments related to this survey and what Christina and Mary here at the end have just shared. So I will start things off with Paula.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all the data, and appreciate the charts with all of the different demographic groups, you know, age, in the time in the district, and gender and school. I think it is really helpful to give me a good idea and everyone looking at it. I did notice very positive feedback from elementary students for school climate and school belonging, and not the same for high school students. And I'm curious to know, I'm especially worried about non-binary students. I'm guessing you mean gender. It's not stated, but I'm thinking that. So for non-binary students and multiracial students, I'm worried about their feelings about not feeling respected by their students, and that's really all that I have burning in my mind today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paula. It's nice to see you today virtually. So yes, non-binary is gender non-conforming. So students, they self-select the identity. So it was gender identity, and one of the options was non-binary. So students who identify as gender non-conforming. That historically, we have a long history. The Minnesota Student Survey data also aligns with very similar experiences. Gratefully, we have a really robust GLOW program, which is gay, lesbian, or whatnot, that was so large this school year that we had to divide it into two separate groups. So it was run twice versus once. I think there were at the highest 42 students. And also, we are creating, I thought what Crystal might have spoke to is we've proposed to provide ongoing student support this summer for students who have been identified by social workers. And one of the things that we've proposed is to actually maintain that group. The high school social worker, with Latanya's support, will be offering the GLOW group on a monthly or twice a month basis. I'm not sure. So yes, that's definitely an area we have a very strong gender inclusion policy, a very strong process, and that's an area that we're going to continue to be mindful of. We have some opportunities at the middle school to do this more and differently. We were slower to start the GSA work at the middle school, and we'll have opportunities to do that differently and better come fall with 2 new school social workers there. So thank you for that. Does that help?
Yep. And can you say a little bit about students? What was the other one?
Yeah.
I got it.
Positive experience in general. Yeah. So it's interesting that Dr. Daniels is on if she wants to step into her high school role too. So there were real opportunities this fall to pay attention to social emotional learning and tier 1 expectations and supports to students and enhancing and being mindful of relationships. So Dr. Daniel has been in student council meetings, getting feedback. We have a very robust high school safe and supportive program. We got data in the hands of our principals in February. So we really look forward to our deep dive in August to hop deeper into this and be even more mindful and intentional about the support and the work we'll do at the 6-12 level to build how students experience secondary and school climate. So there's opportunities, Paula. Dr. Daniels, is there anything else that you'd want to add? Because we did some deep work this fall and spring.
I just want to echo, good evening, everyone. I just want to echo what I think I heard Tim allude to earlier this evening, this whole aspect of student voice and students knowing early on that they have a voice in their educational experience in Richfield Public Schools. And I think that is a true value of this district, and it is just pervasive. And we see that we have more work to do. I was very disappointed in the percentages that Ms. Gonzalez just shared with you all. And we have worked very intentionally as a secondary team. Specifically, I can speak specifically for what we've done at the high school by increasing social work, by doubling up on our GLBTQI affinity groups, by making our assistant principals and as well as myself more accessible and available for students, and really sending a message that bullying and anything that's inappropriate for students will not be tolerated. And so those are things that we've stated. That's stated in my beginning of the year presentation, in my check-in in second semester. That message comes across loudly and clearly. However, this is what I always say to students. However, I can't follow you everywhere to every one of your classes. No one can. So we really need you to elevate your voices to let us know what your experiences are so we can get in front of that as much as possible. And that, unfortunately, even on this historic day, when I think about the Supreme Court decision, that remains the work. We still have a lot of work to do. I am just fortunate that the students were brave enough to say, you know what, this is my experience, and to give us the data and illuminate the fact that we still have a lot of inroads to make to ensure that our students, all of our students, multiracial, non-gender conforming students, feel safe and feel seen and feel heard in Richfield Public Schools. So we've done work, but there's still more work to do. Thank you so much, Ms. Gonzalez and Mary, for inviting me into the conversation.
Thank you, everyone. I'll pass the mic to Ms. Malek.
Hi, I also really wanted to thank all of you for putting this together. I was in the Safe and Supportive Schools meetings where we talked about these questions and really refined and made a lot of adjustments to the questions we asked and how we were going to ask them. And it was really neat to be a part of that and to hear all the perspectives of everybody making adjustments to the questions. I feel like Christina answered all of my questions in her comments throughout and after that I had, so that was really great. And then also to point out, that Ms. Daniel said that some of the results are really disappointing. I would like to just turn it a little bit and really point out that you guys asked, and That's why we know that. And so taking the time to do this survey, put this together, and ask these questions so that we have that information, that gives us the opportunity to make the changes that need to be made. So really, I mean, even though it's tough, the fact that these questions were asked and that we now clearly know this and know that we have to make these changes is a huge step forward. If we hadn't asked, if we had just gone with other surveys and never really asked specifically what was going on for our kids, we just wouldn't know it. So I think that's a good thing, and that is setting us in the right direction. So thank you guys for all of this work. And I will move to Mr. Paulus.
Thank you. I have no comments beyond what Ms. Cole and Ms. Malik have already brought up. So thank you very much for the presentation. Ms. Smishak.
Thanks, Director Paulus. And thank you for the presentation. I echo what everybody else has said. It's just a lot of rich data that's really important. And I was kind of curious as a new person still, the process with the data. I'm wondering if this is kind of like baseline data and sometime in the future we'll be giving the survey again.
Yeah, that's a great question, Allegra. It's nice to see you as well. I'd like to see that baby. That would be the most important person in the meeting, but I know it's got to do the thing with the board, but I'm thinking about that baby. So
appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm glad. So yes, essentially this is a baseline, and we will be engaging in this survey process on an annual basis, right? So utilizing this data already did reflect and implement programming and supports once we received it, and then ongoing. So it will be baseline and then on an annual basis from here forth in the fall administered.
Awesome.
And we'll be mindful about how it's administered. We'd like to see more completion rates for parents. And we had really great success, like Steve spoke about, for the strategic planning with outreach workers calling families personally. So we'll be mindful to embed these opportunities. It wasn't super successful at conferences to be completed, so we'll just ideate and work to increase our completion rates for 2020-21.
Fantastic. And then you kind of talked about deep dives, and I'm just curious if that, like, how you know what levers to pull and to try, that the next time that you do the survey can reflect on, figure out, you know, if they worked or not. Is that what is there?
Qualtrics. I'm sorry.
Oh,
is that Qualtrics is so? Let me. The questions were built from studying a number of surveys that are used for school climate surveys. So we had originally partnered with an organization who utilized Panorama Education. Panorama does climate surveys and administers them and warehouses them. So between using some of what their questions look like as a template and then updating them both to be developmentally appropriate, and we were very intentional as we built the questions with building leaders that this not be about, to be honest, about a got you. This isn't about blaming or inculpating specific teachers or administrators. It's really to get a picture of what the school climate experience is for students, is for administrators, is for parents and guardians. And so the questions were built out of Panorama, and then they're housed and administered out of Qualtrics, which is the warehouse. So so that's where that is. That's what those questions are. But we don't anticipate making many changes to the questions themselves. We just are going to then utilize the trend data over time to see where things improve and change and shift.
thank you so much, Christina.
You're welcome.
Director Timsing?
So Allegra has asked the first question that was on my mind, which was the methodology question. So I very much appreciate the feedback from Director Gonzalez on how what I'm hearing is we're using this first iteration of the survey as a baseline. And while we are taking some actionable interpretations from it, being very conscious of keeping everything stable so that we have trending and ability to really start getting a much more rich picture over time. So I'm very happy to hear that that's the methodology we're following. A couple of very specific questions. So we did call out the non-binary subgroup as a subgroup that was quantitatively different in their responses from the group as a whole. I'm assuming that there are other subgroups that you looked at, for instance, how students identified racially or ethnically. Did we find that among those subgroups that the differences were sort of not enough to mention? Is that kind of your observation, or can you report on that?
That's
Even
exactly
just in a
it.
qualitative way?
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. We saw the most stark distinctions in students who identified as multiracial and students who identified as gender nonconforming. There's some similar data points that happen across gender for the student survey around mental health symptomology and suicidality and self-harm that gets isolated by gender identity, which is female. So correct that there was a more significant and an importance to name students who identifies as gender nonconforming. Pretty stark. If you hop back into those slides, it's like 30 and 40% lower than the average. So, and then students who are multiracial.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And knowing that you may not have this number right at the top of your head, but how large of a sample are we talking about with the students who identify as non-binary? Is this a couple hundred? Is this dozens? How big of a sample there? The reason I ask that question is to get a sense of, obviously, the smaller the sample, the more volatile that number can be.
So N of 30 is considered a good sample size. And I feel really confident that it's greater than an N of 30. If the students who participate in GLOW, also some identify as gender nonconforming, and the group is anywhere between 40 and 50 students. I think a lot about what students will report on a school climate survey. We talked a lot as leaders about, will students feel as if they can speak their truth and answer both in identity and questions, completing a survey on their school administered Google Chromebooks, because what was really important to us as a team. And so we actually developed really clear talking points about how no one will see this data. It's protected. You're entirely anonymous. So what I can say is that from the large student population, my sense is that the sample size is large enough to be valid. I can't confidently necessarily say how they identified and reported on the survey. I can't. We can look at that. I can try to get that number. I can get that number. And gender is so fluid too, especially for 9th, 10th, and up for, 9th and 10th especially. So even the number we see might not even be an accurate depiction of identity because of the process of identity formation. So, but I can get that number, Peter, and I'd be, It's
a point in time. I get it.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. Last question, specifically on the gender nonconforming subgroup. Am I recalling correctly that we cited data on that non-binary response among the responses from the elementary school cohort? Am I remembering that right?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, I put myself on silent and started answering. If I remember correctly, it's only on the secondary survey, but I'd have to go back. I'm not remembering. But it's, I believe we only added that for the 612 survey, but I'd have to go back in the slides because I had to tape this a lot of times, so I'm not remembering exactly the voiceover. So
the slides, excuse me, Christina, the slides do indicate that it was at in elementary.
Sure.
Oh, we did pull that for elementary. Tim
Yes,
confirmed we did give students an opportunity to mark gender as fluid in elementary as well. But that wasn't a critical data point for elementary,
okay.
I don't think. Maybe. I'd have to look back.
Yeah, okay. And so that's, that was then leading to my next question. So the next question was going to be, you obviously talked about the GLOW group as an affinity group among secondary students that were looking at further developing that model at the middle school. And I mean, this is me just simply not knowing the answer. What would be sort of the developmentally appropriate analog to do among those younger kids? And so again, don't know the answer. I'm curious, but if we do, I mean, if the data is actually telling us, and maybe this is something we need to sort of be very careful with and understand very intentionally with time. But I was just kind of curious about that to sort of see how that emerges. So I'll stay tuned for more information, as I know you guys are going to dive deeper on that.
Yeah.
The conscious discipline model was something I'm interested in. How does that align with, because the other behavioral intervention that we've obviously focused on over the years is PBIS.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk about how that aligns with PBIS?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So PBIS is a tiered system of support. It's rewards based often. So there's a lot of extrinsic motivation that if I, as a student, complete my test, Mr. Tenzing is going to give me a token. And when I get 15 tokens, I get to go to the school store. So in clinical or psychology, that would be an extrinsic motivator. And that's not within me. Their hope is in PBIS that it becomes part of an intrinsic internal desire response to do well. Conscious discipline's the exact opposite. It starts from the inside out and it starts with the adults and then moves into students. The idea is that adults are the co-regulators of their students, that if an adult in a classroom, we see this a lot, and I also want to be sure that I share, we delivered a social emotional learning survey to staff in April of 2018, and I want to say between 80 and 90% of staff, the vast majority, said the greatest need was a tier 1 clear school-wide practice of behavior expectations and interventions, that the greatest need in their building was for that. And so conscious discipline first talks about the 7 skills of conscious adults. And we can get you, if you're interested, Peter, we got some licenses, or we can just get you like a participant guide. So please feel free to email me and any board member if you want to learn a little bit more. We can get you our participant guides or some brief videos. I can send a short video as well that's about a student who's talking about his experience in a classroom. However, so it starts with the 7 conscious of adults, conscious practices, and things like perception and composure. One of the things they first teach students is this idea of stop, take a breath, and relax. And then it moves into creating the 7 conscious of adults, then the 7 skills of discipline to make even opportunities for correcting behaviors a relationship enhancing one and a teachable moment. Also focuses on the first 6 weeks of school to build school family, that classrooms are extensions of families, that there are specific roles and tools around how classrooms are. And then within that is that idea of safe spaces and corners and breathing and mindfulness. So as adults acquire skills, they then practice and modulate it. The last component of conscious discipline is what they call brain state, and it teaches about the frontal lobe. Well, you're the doctor, but the frontal lobe, where we do our executive functioning, where we learn, and hopefully everyone's frontal lobe is awake right now. I was down in my brainstem at first, kind of tired. So the idea is to teach teachers how to keep kids awake in their frontal lobe, but when they are down in that brainstem, be it because of history of trauma or something is triggering the grown-up or the kid, to be able to recognize where kids are at, understand the brain, and then recognize where kids are at and modify how they respond with a sensitivity to how the brain works. And that kids can only learn when their frontal lobe is awake and engaged. So that's the other component of conscious discipline, to literally teach teachers about how the brain works. The notorious FLB, frontal lobe.
Yeah, cool. So thank you very much for that. One of the first interactions I had as a school board member, probably almost 12 years ago now, with our staff was around the staff sending a very clear message that consistency was key, and I'm hearing that from you as well, that as leaders we're not shifting strategies and sort of not being hyper reactive. And so I think that what I'm hearing is that, you know, we're engaging tools and strategies that are complementary and that all work together, and that, you know, sort of our overall focus, whether it's PBIS, whether it's conscious discipline, whatever it is, that this is all aligned and complementary, and that we're able to keep that message very consistent for our staff so that they have that consistent set of expectations and can have a very clear notion of what success looks like. So that's the thing that's important to me on this as a board member, is that we're continuing to be very intentional about not being scattered or reactive, but being intentional. And I'm confident that you're doing that. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Peter. I do just want to say that I think it's really important that I'm learning a lot about conscious discipline, and I believe it is an equity-based practice and aligns really beautifully with Innocent Classroom, because our Innocent Classroom work is about finding that which for what all other things are done, finding out a child's good. And conscious discipline is about, and I'll send this video to Steve and he can send it to you all, but the video is really powerful. It's about giving kids student jobs and engaging them in ways. If we as the grown-ups get triggered, I know I talk a lot about, like, if our worst self was on paper, I don't know if folks want me to be the director of student support services. And for some of our families and some of our teachers, their worst day is on paper because of the fishbowl in which they exist. So conscious discipline's about repair and mindfulness of our own experiences and triggers and just meeting kids in a relational way. That's why I think it's pretty powerful. So, and it incorporates mindfulness and understanding the brain. So I feel like, and again, we're going to, Nancy literally taught one skill year one for an entire year. There's 7. And so what I keep saying to teachers and leaders, let's do it in a way that's digestible and relatable, because this is what teachers are asking us for. They got teaching down in many ways. It's the relational stuff that gets in the way of learning. So thanks, Peter.
So I'll pass my time to Crystal.
Thank you. And Pete did touch on the disaggregation question that I also had in terms of understanding disproportionalities in responses. So thank you for addressing that. I think the one other thing I would just note is it looks fairly glaring that white parents are overrepresented in the parent response. And so I know I heard you already say that, you know, we're learning a lot of lessons about outreach and how to successfully get in touch with our families in a way that works for them. So just wanted to say, I see it and I appreciate knowing that that is coming. And we'll also be eager to really sort of hear what some of those big core priorities are going to be once you have the time in August to keep planning and to keep thinking about what comes next. So that's all I wanted to share. No real questions.
Thanks, Crystal.
Any final comments or questions from the board, or Steve, if there's anything else that you would like to add here as well?
Crystal, this is Tim. I did, following your comments about how at the next meeting we would commence a discussion about the SROs in terms of their role and their presence in our buildings. I think it's important for the board to have an understanding of what sort of materials we might get to try and evaluate that program. And so, for starters, I know I've read the contract we have, and I would encourage everyone on the board to do the same. I know we've received some administrative feedback on their view of the program, and we're actively trying to track students down during the summer to get student view, of course, which will be very important for anything we review. It's just as that unfolds, I think those are important things. But among the things that are also critical to evaluate the program is, we pay for that program with sort of a specific funding stream, and we have to have an understanding of what can that funding be used that accomplishes the goals towards a safe campus and a campus with a positive environment if it's not going to be used for this function. And also understand that when people are asked what their experiences are and how they've viewed it, that we really do narrow down on, what are the things in the past that have occurred that could not be accomplished by a new model, whatever that new model might be, and what is really unique to having a resource officer on campus full time. And so I think those things, need to be part of the discussion. It's not the entirety of it, but I think those are, for starters, things we need to be thinking about as we head into, the discussion in 2 weeks.
Yep, I fully agree with you. And I think you touched on the fact that there are different pieces of information that have been collected over the last few weeks in particular. And I think our responsibility is to actually put those pieces and some others together and actually share some of those pieces publicly. Because I think our entire community deserves to see some of these little pieces of information that we have been getting a line of sight into just over the last few weeks, so that we can have a holistic and public discussion about the information that we have, about the options that are available to us, and about the questions that we have as a board and as a district. So I have confidence that we're going to be able to put these pieces together in a really clear and hopefully helpful way as we figure out where to go from here, and would just encourage people as soon as possible before the next meeting, if there are specific pieces of information that you would like to have as part of this conversation, that you get in touch with Steve and or myself so that we can make sure we have ample time to actually put this together, as do our staff. Anything else? Okay, we have one commendation to share this evening, so I will turn it over to Superintendent Yanowski for that.
There's quite a bit here, so I'm going to do a little bit of summarizing while trying to get the intention. It's to Amy Winter and the RSTEM team from parent Lori Brusek, who wanted to take a minute to send their deepest appreciations for all that has been done for their family this year. Beginning with Amy, from the moment they met her to tour the building, she felt the culture of the school and the caring of the students and staff, and a team who understood the challenges of having a child who learns differently. Watching Amy and the staff on the tour, they were sure that their son Ryan would feel welcome and positive at STEM. They specifically call out Emily, who in here isn't identified, but she's the special ed team lead, who once meeting knew they had found the right place, reviewing Ryan's history and showing how invested she was in ensuring that Ryan was successful, both from an academic but also a social emotional perspective. Emily is pointed out as showing her care about each of her students and how much just making sure that Ryan was successful within the school. And then also talking specifically about Omar and Omar McMillan, and how knowing that when Ryan went into the classroom, they knew that this was the correct place. And you immediately saw academic and self-esteem and academic gains for Ryan in the classroom. Went from refusing to participate in class in previous schools to being an open participator in Omar's classroom. A couple of lines are that Omar truly has a gift with kids, and it's no wonder he was nominated for Teacher of the Year. He's truly deserving of the honor, and we are excited for him to be recognized. And I'm just going to read the last paragraph verbatim. or very closely, thank you for all that you have done. We are deeply grateful, and you should feel incredibly proud of the amazing school you have and the tremendous impact you're having on your students, families, and staff. Please do share this with your district team, as you really should be the model for all schools. And so I specifically want to call out Amy, Emily, and Omar. I'm proud of the work that they did with this particular family, and I'm very pleased that we were able to read this commendation at the board. So thank you to our amazing team members, and thank you to Parent Lori for sharing this story.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda containing routine business items. Since this is routine, I will not individually call on board members for questions or comments, but rather just pause to see if there are any questions. Okay. Seeing and hearing none, other than that noise that Superintendent Yanowski just made. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I will move the consent agenda as presented.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
I believe I heard Ms. Cole in there. Was that accurate?
Yes.
Great. So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Cole. Any discussion?
Hearing none, I will poll the board. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishek?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie?
Aye. Thank you. The consent agenda is approved. We move into old business, which this evening is again the 4 existing board policies that we've been in the process of revising and discussing in recent meetings. So first up is Board Policy 502 and the accompanying guidelines on resident and non-resident student enrollment.
All right, and so obviously note to self, put self on mute before you're struggling going between notes and agenda and Google Meet. So sorry about that audible gasp. All right, number 502. So we believe we are ready with a final draft of resident and non-resident enrollment. We have gone through cleaning up things in terms of how we conduct a lottery, how students are selected for our schools, how do we walk through these processes, and then also clearing up at the end the guideline has the sample registration requirements as an example of what is required at our high school. With that, I will put that forward to the board for questions or a motion.
Thank you. So to be clear, the administration feels as though this is ready for approval, assuming there are not any significant questions or issues that come up here as we go through the list of board members. So Paula, you're up first.
I don't have any questions. I think I've seen it all. Thank you.
I have no questions either. Mr. Paulus?
I have no questions. Ms. Smishek?
No questions. Mr. Tensing?
I have no questions. Chair Brockie.
Thank you. I hope the entire team can bask in the glory of not a single question or comment in that round. So congratulations to everyone who worked on this. Do we have a motion to approve the revisions to Board Policy 502?
I will move the approval of the additions to Board Policy.
So moved.
So we have a motion by Mrs. Malik, and I'm going to give the second to Mr. Tensing. Any discussion?
Hearing none, I will poll the board. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishek?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie?
Aye. The policy is approved. Next, we have Board Policy 612 and the accompanying guidelines on curriculum development.
And so I'm just going to give a heads up to the board. We had a small technical glitch occur with both Policy 612 and Policy 112. There was feedback given by the board at the last meeting. Board Chair Brockie and I actually went through both of those with a fine-tooth comb together, edited and did some final revisions. And for some reason, something ended up updating, I believe, believe there was a power outage Thursday afternoon, and so some of the changes that were made did not end up in the board packet. And so these two policies, which are in front of you tonight, are actually not finalized nor updated. So we are going to just remember that 612 is around curriculum development. It is a required state policy. And I plan to have that technical glitch fixed in the final board packet items for you on both 612 and the next one, 112, at the next board meeting.
Okay. We'll still take them one at a time just in case there are things that people want to raise here in the meeting. So first, any questions or comments about board policy 612? Paula.
I don't have, no, because I wanted to see the other one. So none about this one that we talked about.
Same for me, none about this one. I will see when we get the updated. Mr. Paulus?
I have none to comment on this one. Ms. Mishek.
Likewise, Mr. Ten.
I am good as well, Chair Brecky.
Great, thank you. So 612 will be back at our next meeting with the changes reinserted, and hopefully we'll be able to take action at that time. Steve, is there anything that you would like to add about policy 112, the wellness policy, before we just do a quick round to see if there's any comments board members would like to share this evening?
The only brief update is we did have the nutrition team and Michael Manning take a look prior to what you don't have in your board packet again tonight, but rest assured that the nutrition team and Mr. Manning have taken a look and given input.
So again, just in the interest of keeping to our protocol, we'll give everybody a chance to share if there's anything that you would like to say this evening. Paula.
I don't have any comments, no.
I shared my questions with Superintendent Yanowski already, and I'm thinking that perhaps most of them will be covered in the new revisions. So that is it for me, Mr. Paulus.
I have no comments at this time. I'll wait for the updated revisions. Ms. Mishek.
I also don't have any comments at this time.
I am good, Chair Brecky.
Great, thank you. So the final policy before us this evening is 612, and it's accompanying guidelines on the selection and evaluation of instructional resources. This one is just before us for the second time, so we were not intending to take action regardless this evening. Superintendent Yanowski, is there anything you'd like to share about this one?
So just as a reminder, there are two required policies from the state of Minnesota. One is around the overall process, and then one is around the specific selection of materials. And so this one is around specific selection of materials. There is some additional revision that will occur to this policy. So we took some initial revisions, and then there is some more work to do prior to this coming back to the board. So we'll have at least a third read, possibly a fourth, but we'll see where we're at for our next meeting.
Great, thank you. So initial chance for any comments here, starting with Paula.
I don't have any questions. Ms. Malik?
No questions either. Mr. Paulus?
I have no questions at this time. Ms. Mishek.
No questions. Mr. Tensing?
I also have no questions, Chair Brecky.
I am good as well. Thank you to everyone for a record-breaking old business section. That was remarkably swift, but work that we'll come back to at our next meeting. So we move now to the long list of new business items before us for the first time this evening. First is the Joint Powers Agreement for Metro South Adult Basic Education.
All right, we are part of a consortium called Metro South. It includes Richfield, Bloomington, Eden Prairie, and Edina. And so we provide, or Metro South provides, adult basic education services for our residents 17 years of age or older who are not currently enrolled in regular schools. We are required to, on a regular basis, I believe it is every 2 years, come back and review and agree our agreement to remain within this group and to remain within adult basic ed. And so we have, it's one of my favorite graduation ceremonies of the year. We have an adult basic education graduation. There is a wide range of students who have gone back. And as part of this consortium, adults are provided education as part of our team. And so we are just asking the board to reaffirm our partnership and continue on with the Metro South adult basic education.
Okay, thank you. Board member questions and or comments, beginning with Paula.
None at this time, Ms. Malik.
No questions, Mr. Paulus.
Just two comments. One, you addressed one of them, that this consortium has worked well for our district, and we feel it's a positive and worth continuing. And second, our attorney has reviewed the contract and said it's something we could sign, correct? Or it's consistent with one we've done in the past.
It is the same contract, essentially just pushed forward, yes.
Great, thank you. No more questions. Ms. Smishek.
I do not have any questions. Mr. Tensing.
If I can figure out how to unmute myself, I will say that I have no questions.
Thank you. All right. So having no additional comments or questions, we could entertain a motion to approve the renewed joint powers agreement.
So moved.
I second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Smishek. Any final discussion? Christine, you're on mute.
Thank you. Hearing none, I will poll the board. Ms. Cole.
Aye.
Mr. Paulus.
Aye.
Ms. Smishek.
Aye.
Mr. Tensing.
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie.
Aye, the agreement is approved. Next up is the presentation of and request to approve the district's budget for 2020-2021.
Very good. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I have for your approval tonight the recommendation to adopt the budget for 2020-2021. It is very similar to what the board reviewed at the May board meeting. We made one small change where we balanced out revenues associated with donations to the unpaid meal debt with projected expenditures for the unpaid meal debt, and so that was a small change within this. It does include $91,501,388 in total revenues, $67,844,000 of those in the general fund, projected total expenditures of $130,743,347, $69,382,406 of those are in the general fund expenditures. As we talked about last month, we had some assumptions of the 2% increase in the per pupil funding associated with that. Also, this accounts for projected enrollment reductions with some of the trends in enrollment projections that way, as well as reductions in compensatory funds. It projects to have an unassigned fund balance of 7.68% at the end of next year, with a total general fund projected balance of $11,336,848, which represents about $16 million. And that accounts for the assigned and restricted accounts in addition to that unassigned portion. There is total deficit spending when you factor in the construction funds as well as the other funds of $39,241,000. Most of that obviously is in the construction fund of $37,605,259. There's detail included in this regarding specific programs and areas, as well as the best summary is that budget overview that includes the projected fund balance at the end of this year, budget revenues for next year, budget expenditures for the following year, the projected fund balance for June 30, 2021, and then that net increase or decrease provides that good summary document for everybody. We did review this with Fiscal Planning Advisory Committee last Monday, and they approved moving this forward with these recommendations. And just one other note, in the original adopted budget for the current year, we had projected just over the 7.7 million or 7.7% in net unassigned fund balance, even though that was projected to go up with the unassigned fund balance this year. The 7.68 is just above the 7.54, which was projected as part of the adopted budget. So our unassigned fund balance for next year, even with the deficit spending, is slightly higher or pretty much on the path where the original adopted budget was for our 1920 fiscal year. So very much on track with where we had originally projected we would be ending up this year. There is some additional CARES Act funding that accounts for additional expenditures or aligns with additional expenditures that just came through. That will be incorporated in the revised budget for next year, as well as will be considered as part of the FY20 budget when we look at the adopted budget this year as far as that impact. So with that, we do recommend approval here tonight so that we can continue the budgeting process and move this information into the system. And if there are questions, I can certainly respond to those.
Thank you, Craig. We will move right into board member questions or comments, beginning with Paula.
Thank you. So I don't have concerns about the budget, but I am curious to understand in your uncertainty about the fall, what is the process to revise the budget and expenditures, and how have they compared, from what we've seen in the last 3 months, what we've experienced? So I guess I just want to know how ready we are to shuffle things around, or what will be the board involvement in that, or the timeline, since we don't really know anything about September.
Yep. So we're watching very carefully. One of the things, obviously, with our largest expenditure areas being staffing, and the largest area of that staffing being teachers, we have a lot of restrictions on how when we can be making decisions about teacher staffing. And so much of this actually occurred after we could be doing significant reductions. At this point, there's obviously a lot of uncertainties. And as Administration of Fiscal Planning Advisory Committee, we have been careful about trying to make sure we're not trying to fill positions in August or September when we have more information, but at the same time are planning appropriately. So we are monitoring that. We are holding on some of our staff fills as far as paraprofessionals or other positions that are currently vacant until we have more information about what next year's school is looking like. We are also carefully monitoring enrollment trends, specifically have our online application or online enrollment form up where we're collecting information, having people still completing the applications for next year. So we're watching that carefully, and we'll be monitoring any of those changes over the summer with a lot of detail. But a lot of the staffing really has already been set just based on the timelines for probationary staffing and implications that way. Fortunately, one of the things, knock on wood, we have a fund balance that isn't at the minimum that allows us to move into next year with some confidence that we aren't risking going into statutory operating debt or things like that, absent something significant that would really probably be impacting all school districts in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Craig, can you just validate my understanding? We basically have two tools that we can use that as the board we have authorized the administration to use to be pretty nimble over the summer. One would be that unassigned fund balance, but the second then is, and Craig, I think you can talk about the specific fund, but there is an assigned fund that we have sort of been setting money into for maintaining class size.
Yeah, so, and actually there are a couple pieces. So in addition to this budget, there is an assigned for enrollment changes or unanticipated enrollment changes that allows us to flex. But we also have built into this budget a contingency of 3 teaching positions that theoretically would be used if enrollment goes up. But those are also positions that wouldn't have to be used or be staffed if enrollment goes down. I think those are the 2 areas that you're talking about.
Yeah, so I think that the point for Paula, hopefully this gives you some sense of confidence that Craig has already built in those 3 FTE of flexibility and potentially could access more if we have a big surge of enrollment.
Thank you. One last question. I know that for summer school, I read that we're doing the 9 student, 1 teacher offers. If we were to have to do something like that in the fall, then we're gonna be very short on teachers. So it doesn't really fit into this conversation, but I just want you to know I'm thinking about that. And because if we do need more teachers, this is gonna be very different budget. Are we thinking about that? Where will that potential money will come from, or should I not worry about it until the governor says something?
So I'll let Steve jump in on planning. Obviously, we're looking at multiple planning options. There is some additional funding that came through with the CARES Act that the district has access to for some of those potential expenditures. That is an option. And so there's approximately $1 million over 3 different types of grants associated with that CARES Act that was just announced last week, I think is when more detailed information came out about it. And so that has not been built into this budget yet. That does provide a little bit more latitude, both for some of those potential expenditures to really make programs take place, but also for some of the costs that the district has incurred for unanticipated expenditures associated with the CARES Act or associated with COVID-19. So, and obviously we're looking at different models that will be efficient with resources, and then watching that carefully, and there will be a lot of action moving on after July 31st, just as far as looking at what does that mean for staffing, whether it's licensed staff or paraprofessional staff and additional supports to make sure instruction is taking place at a high level.
Thank you. Ms. Malik.
So that was mainly one of my concerns also, and I know that we already have a lot of things in place and that a lot of thought has already gone into this. I would just say, as we learn more, I know that you'll keep us in the loop. And I think for right now, I don't think I can expect a lot more. So that's all I have. Mr. Ball.
Just a brief response, even though this is sort of foreshadowing what I was going to talk about in the legislative update. But we are expecting this week to get some more CDC guidelines from the state of Minnesota. That has been announced, and then they are anticipating announcing out to schools the expectation for the learning model, but they're not planning to do that until the very last week of July. So what our teams began last week was planning for distance learning, hybrid learning, or in-person learning. And so our summer for the next 7 weeks will be planning 3 different models at the same time to try to figure out what would we do given any form of guidance. And then we'll obviously go into fast motion the first week of August. As Director Cole pointed out, there are implications for staffing and there are a lot of unknowns in the world. And so we are trying to create contingencies and create plans in case we have more students, fewer students, some teachers not showing up, too many teachers. We just don't know what's going to happen. And so we're trying to plan for every possible contingency, and then we can narrow our work as obviously guidance goes and time goes by.
And if I can jump in with one more piece too. So we're obviously looking at what happens if fewer kids show up, what happens if more kids show up, what happens if our staffing model has to change according to what that looks like. From a staffing class size, this model was built in most cases around a slightly lower class size in the range of the class sizes that would fall within the normal range. So the number of students in a section at a grade level of the building, where if we reduce one more teacher, it would have put it at the high level of what the range would be. We left it at the lower range in most situations. With reduced class sizes or with reduced enrollment, we did not end up reducing a proportional exact reference of that across the district, just to keep our class sizes relatively low, which we know is a priority for the board and a priority for our community.
I think it's me, correct? All right.
Yeah.
I have some detailed questions for you, Craig, but I didn't send them to you in advance, so I won't put you on the spot for something in on line 83. So I'll just reiterate what I'd said before, and what Paula did bring up is that given all this uncertainty, of course, we have to be as nimble as we can within the contracts that we have and the staffing that we have. It is interesting, the constraints that we're staring at in the summer school model of 9 students, one staff member. If you extend that to the very first contact students have with us in a day, that's the buses. And the buses, you think of what a requirement to have distancing on a bus means. Like, we can manufacture more buses immediately, and we can manufacture more drivers when we're already in a shortage. And so the challenges we'll face, we'll find out what they will be in the end of July. So we have 7 weeks, 3 different things. I'm very excited to hear about all 3 eventually. That's all I have. I'll pass it to Ms. Mishek.
I will mirror Mr. Paulus's enthusiasm, but I do not have any questions. Mr. Tenson.
So thank you. And yep, the fiscal planning, as the board liaison to fiscal planning, I can certainly verify that that fiscal planning committee, had a good endorsement of where we're at with the budget right now. We've done a little bit of looking at, I think the only real detail piece from fiscal planning that is resonating with me was basically that group did want to get some clarity on how we're managing the assigned funds and looking at those as a resource. Obviously, we are looking ahead even beyond the 2021 school year. And so it's going to be, I think, that next budget, the 21-22 budget, will be really an interesting one. But I think right now we're in a reasonably good position, hopefully, to be adapting to some of the uncertainties that are sure to come over the next 12 to 24 months. So I will pass it forward to Chair Brockie.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Given especially the importance of approving our budget for 2020, 2021, I'll just pause to make sure there are not any final comments or questions. Okay, seeing and hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the budget?
I will move approval of the budget.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Cole. Any final discussion?
Hearing none, I will pull the board. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Mishek?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie.
Aye. The budget for 2020-2021 is approved. Next, we have a resolution to approve the long-term facilities maintenance plan for Intermediate District 287.
Thank you. Again, this is something that we routinely take a look at. We are requesting approval of the long-term facilities maintenance for the proportional share of Richfield schools as part of this board meeting. We will also be bringing Richfield School District's 280 long-term facilities maintenance plan to the board at the next meeting. These are plans that need to be approved by a board prior to the end of July. You'll notice Chair Brockie's signature on the 287 board resolution, so she can talk a little bit more about the details. But basically, it is for their ongoing expenditures and their bonding associated with long-term facilities maintenance funding. Richfield's share of that is 5.854% of their total LTFM expenditures, and that is proportional to the students who have been served historically in 287 by Richfield schools. And so that's how that calculation is included in that. There's detail included in it. We didn't receive any questions specific to it, but it is aligned, and these Both of these budgets are rigorously reviewed by Minnesota Department of Education for making sure that they qualify for the funding and the expenditures are appropriate in that area. So with that, we are requesting approval for the 287 long-term facilities maintenance budget tonight.
Thank you, Craig. And yes, I have seen this one before. It feels like it's been a long time, even though it probably hasn't been that long. So my memory may be a little bit fuzzy, but I know we talked about it at a 287 board meeting, and I asked a couple of questions about sort of timing and why dollars were what they were in future years, and the team had good answers to all of my questions for what it's worth. So with that, we will have time for any individual board member comments or questions about this Intermediate District 287 plan, starting with Paula.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Ms. Malik.
No questions from me either. Mr. Paulus?
When Crystal said for what it's worth a lot that she felt satisfied with the questions when she was at the 287 meeting. I have no further questions. Ms. Smishek.
No questions. Mr. Tensing?
I have no questions. Ms. Bracke.
Thank you. And thank you, Tim. I appreciate that a lot. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll move the resolution as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr.
I will second.
Christine, good to get you out. We have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Malik. Any final discussion?
Hearing none. This is a resolution, so I will pull the board. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishek?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Bracke.
Aye. The resolution is granted, and thank you on behalf of the Intermediate District 287 School Board as well. Next, we have another resolution. This is to approve the cooperative agreement for girls swimming and diving between Richfield Public Schools and the Academy of Holy Angels.
Just a routine order of business. So some of our sports and athletics, we partner with colleague schools. And so in this case, girls swim and dive, partnering with Holy Angels. We would serve as the host school and partner up for a girls swim and dive team collaborative between Richfield and Holy Angels. So even though we are competitors in some regards, we are also partners. So we are happy to present this to you today and happy to move forward.
Thank you. Board member questions or comments, starting with Paula.
No questions, Ms. Malik.
No questions. Mr. Paulus?
No questions. Ms. Smishek.
No questions.
I have no questions. I will just simply reflect that as a swim and dive parent, I'm excited about this cooperative. We have this co-op now as an opportunity for both our boys swim and dive and our girls swim and dive. And I'm really excited about this opportunity, and I'm confident that it'll help us to continue to grow a program that has a great legacy in our community, and it's going to be an opportunity to make it even stronger. So I'm really happy about it.
Great.
Chair Bracke.
Thank you for that additional personal experience as well. I have no questions either. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution?
I will
move that we approve the resolution as presented.
I will second.
Perfect. I was going to give the motion to Mr. Tensing and the second to Mr. Paulus, so it worked out great. Any final discussion?
Hearing none, I will pull the board. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Smishek?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
And the clerk votes aye. Ms. Bracke?
Aye. The resolution is granted. So the next 5 new business items are all change orders related to capital facilities work taking place across the district. So Chief Administrative Officer Craig Holge is going to overview all of the change orders, and then we will take action on them on an individual building basis. So Craig, I'll turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you. Is everybody ready for this? We got 5 of them, or 5 sets. So first of all, we have Centennial Elementary change orders 4 and 5. Total of $40,749.06 in changes. 15,000 of which is demolition and structural reinforcement, as well as some other changes to the design. And then $25,463 is for structural changes to a wall that requires saw cutting and additional steel and lintels. Moving on to Sheridan Hills, change order number 2 is $20,334 total for structural modifications to chiller footings, as well as some additional utilities and site utility work required by the city for review. For the STEM school, there's change orders 21 and 22. Richfield STEM School change order 21 is for $24,559.50 for additional painting and patching in selected rooms due to display board removal, as well as some painting of some metal lockers. There were 17 rooms where whiteboards and boards were removed, and that requires additional patching to either the wall board or plasters in those areas, as well as the painting associated with that. And change order 22 is $10,786.87 for plumbing modifications, as well as some other code modifications in that. For STEM, that's a total of $35,346.37. Richfield Middle School change order number 2 is a credit of $1,469.50. One in which we're using 2 mechanical convectors that were not used as part of our STEM renovations, as well as some additional gypsum board soffits and design in the science flex area. And then finally, we have Richfield High School Facilities Project change orders 23 and 24 for a total of $119,148.74. Again, additional site utility work associated with the catch basements, as well as some modifications in some of the office spaces, as well as media center, and then some additional structural beams and work in that area. And then a credit for some finish plan modifications. And then change order 24 is $23,052.75 for some electrical and other mechanical work associated with that project. So with that, the summary sheets provide the new contract sum and what the original contracts for each one of these are for your reference. Just as we're monitoring that, we are still on track budget-wise and within contingency areas as a whole, and are moving forward that way. And with that, if there are any questions, I will try to respond to them or give additional information as requested.
Thank you, Craig. So this is the time for any questions and or comments about any of the change orders before we vote to approve them individually, or excuse me, individually by building. Paula.
No comments, Ms. Malik.
I had asked about the change order 21 for Richfield STEM School, and maybe I just don't have the perspective to grasp this, but $24,000 seemed like really high for patching and paint. You said 17 rooms or 17 boards or 17 rooms with multiple boards. It just sounded like so much to me. So
yeah. So, and I did review that with Andy, and it is very much aligned with what they're seeing. They had to do significant wall repair on some of those. So the way that the marker boards are put onto the walls require, if they don't match up perfectly and aren't exactly replaced like as, there tends to be wall repair around those. And so that was one of the pieces. It wasn't just going in with a paintbrush. It ends up being just over $1,000 a room when you look at the wall repair and that combination of work. I can try to get some additional information on the detailed specs and get some information back to the board. But these change orders are all reviewed by WOLD. They are all reviewed by ICS, and so there are multiple eyes on this to make sure that they are appropriate. There are times that contractors are submitting change orders with pricing, and they're denied based on the review and analysis that way too. So it's they aren't just kind of signed carte blanche with by the board or without multiple people involved in the review of this work too.
And I figured as much, and they definitely know more about the cost than I do, but it just, that one particular one struck me, so I figured it was better to ask than wonder. So thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Paulus?
Thank you, Craig. My first question is actually about the building not mentioned. Should we consider RDLS 100% completed at this point?
They are still working on some punch list items. So the project is essentially completed. I don't, I'll find out if there was, I know that when I last talked, they were working on one more set of change orders on some minor modifications and working on some of the pricing on it. I can't remember if that was 2 change orders ago or last change order. So we're getting down to very close to the fine tune on that one specifically.
Okay, and STEM's, is STEM expected to persist into the fall, or should it be nearly done as well?
STEM is continuing throughout the summer. It is persisting into the fall. There's significant construction going on there yet this school year, especially on the first floors where a lot of the modifications are. Exact timing with all of these projects, we are a bit ahead of schedule because we were able to get into the buildings earlier for demolition. And so we are seeing a number of the buildings further along in the process. But we are watching, obviously, labor changes and things like that. They aren't able to have as many people on site working in close spaces. And then we are also, I'm not sure if it's impacting STEM, but some of the casework and some of the door hardware are some things that we're hearing there might be some delays on. So we're watching those things carefully too. But STEM should be wrapping up essentially at the end of the summer with punch list items and things like that if things stay on schedule.
Okay, I ask mainly because that STEM is creeping up towards the top of its contingency as well, correct?
Yep.
Okay, and RHS, the original thought was that would be completed fall of 2020, October, November-ish. With the interruption, which balanced out with also the students being removed from the building sooner than expected. Yeah. It may have been a wash. We may have gotten ahead. Are we still looking at roughly the same timeline on that?
Yep. So I did talk with Andy on all of the projects. They are ahead of schedule or on schedule from what was originally planned. So that was a late fall completion, if I remember, as far as wrapping things up, but substantially complete with a lot of the areas. As I said, they got into areas this spring that they were planning on getting into in the summer. So they are catching up on a number of those areas.
Thank you.
Okay. I was just going to say, and Andy's watching this, and he said that they are waiting to finalize one last change item with RDLS. So there's one last change order that's coming in through that process.
All right. Well, thanks.
For the real
Andy. Appreciate it. Ms. Mishak.
I don't have any questions or comments. Mr. Tensing?
I have no questions or comments. Ms. Brackey?
Me either. Hi to Andy. Thank you for the information and for being a loyal viewer of our school board meetings. So we will now move into the approval process. First up is the Centennial Facilities Change Order number 4 and 5. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
We had a motion by Mr. Paulus. Ms. Malik, did I hear your voice?
Yes.
Great. So motion by Mr. Paulus, second by Ms. Malik. Any final discussion?
Okay, hearing none, I will pull the board. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Mishak?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brackey?
Aye. The change orders are granted. Next is the Sheridan Hills change order number 2. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Cole. Any final discussion?
Hearing none, I will pull the board. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Mishak?
Aye.
Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
The clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie.
Aye. Change order is granted. Next, Richfield STEM change orders number 21 and 22. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any final discussion?
Hearing none, I will pull the board. Ms. Cole,
Aye.
Mr. Paulus,
Aye.
Ms. Mishek,
Aye.
Mr. Tensing,
Aye.
and the clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie.
Aye. The change orders are granted. Next is Richfield Middle School change order number 2. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Sorry, I spoke up. Who was that seconded?
Allegra can have it.
Okay. Generous. Thank you. We have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Smishek. Any final discussion?
Hearing none, I will pull the board. Ms. Cole,
Aye.
Mr. Paulus,
Aye.
Ms. Mishek,
Aye.
Mr. Tensing,
Aye.
the clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie.
Aye. Change order is granted. And last but not least is Richfield High School change orders number 23 and 24. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Cole and a second by Ms. Malik. Any final discussion?
Hearing none, again, I will pull the board. Ms. Cole,
Aye.
Mr. Paulus,
Aye.
Ms. Mishek,
Aye.
Mr. Tensing,
Aye.
the clerk votes aye, and Ms. Brockie.
Aye. The change orders are granted. And we move now into the advanced planning section of the agenda, beginning with a legislative update. So I will turn things over to Superintendent Yanowski and Board Member Peter Tensing to start the update.
So really only 3 relatively brief updates since we've already heard them. So I'm just going to repeat 3 things that we heard in this meeting. 1, CARES Funding Act came through for Richfield Public Schools to cover some of the significant additional expenditures related to COVID education. So as a reminder, we had estimated over the course of time that somewhere in the range of up to $1 million would be spent in the COVID time. And CARES Act funding produced almost exactly $1 million for Richfield Public Schools. So looking at the technology utilized, the food served, the additional staffing components that were used, we are working to procure the CARES Funding Act money to cover some of those holes in the budget that were created during COVID-19. So that is number 1. Number 2, the governor extended the emergency order through July 13th. So as a reminder, our June 29th board meeting will be held online also. And as we watch what happens in terms of closure, we just want board members to be aware that depending on the Emergency Act, that is what allows us to meet online. And so we need to be prepared. As a district, we will be prepared to meet in person on July 13th. But that will be something we're going to have to watch from a legislative update perspective to see what is next. Should there not be an emergency order extended or different guidance, that again, legislatively is something for us to watch. And then number 3, and we did hear about this in public comment, so we are not fully in control of our future and how we decide to offer education. We have heard voice from different members of our community wanting distance education, in-person education, and hybrid education. One of the things I've learned is that I can have opinions and want certain things, and I may or may not get them. I want school to be in session with our students in front of us in the fall, and that may or may not happen. We will hear some more CDC guidelines this week. We will then, at the end of July, hear what the expectation is from us from the state of Minnesota in regard to education. My assumption, and I'm not going to go very far into that, is we certainly will have to provide some form of distance methodology for immunocompromised people, be they staff, be they students, be they families. I don't have any idea what that's going to look like, but over the summer, we'll begin planning for those 3 alternatives as we wait for legislative guidance to come to us at the end of July. and we will be ready to discuss that openly in our August 3rd board meeting. So with that, I will check in with Mr. Densing to see if he has more.
Yeah, I do not have any further specifics. We did get an update from AMSD today relative to the special session. As would not be surprising, I think, to the board, other members of this board, the items that are really at the top of the priority list for the legislature during the special session are not necessarily specific to K-12 education right now. So there's very important stuff for the legislature to look at relative to both the COVID pandemic and our state's response to that, as well as relative to reform of policing in our communities. And so that's, you know, some very important work that is at the top of the agenda for the special session that, to my knowledge at this point. We'll keep our eyes open, obviously, if there's anything further that comes down the pipe. But that's kind of where we're at this point.
Thank you. I think they're directly connected to the sort of legislative topics, but will maybe then be a bridge to other board member topics. One is wanting to check my assumption that we are going to be in touch with families, community members, and staff this week, just in terms of what we know and what we don't know, specific to Richfield Public Schools. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, that communication is already sitting with Miss Valley. That should be sent out Wednesday or Thursday of this week, and talk about the 3 options that will be outlined by the state. Great,
thank you. And then the second thing I just wanted to share for board members and anyone watching, the Minnesota Department of Education did release a survey today where they are asking family members to share their experiences and their opinions as they are working on these potential models for fall. So if this is something that you feel strongly about or you would like to encourage others to complete, the Department of Education has put this survey out into the world, and I think we should make sure that it gets taken by as many people as possible, so they have that input over the next month and a couple of weeks as they're working through all of these options. And I can.
So yeah, thanks, Crystal, so much.
Yeah. Go ahead, Pete.
Okay, I was just going to say thank you so much for bringing up that survey, and I think, you know, we also obviously want to recognize Lori Humiston for taking this forum to speak, and also to say that I think that, as Steve has referenced, as a local governance body at this point in time, we will be operating likely under some constraints. And so to the extent that you have opinions, it's going to be really important to communicate those to higher levels of governance, whether it be through our legislators or through MDE or through the governor. And as MDE and the governor are trying to make those decisions, this is, I think, going to be really important data, a very important data point for them to take into account, because one of the pieces, even as a physician, one of the pieces that I think about in terms of our response to the pandemic is, as much as there's unknowns on the medical and the health side relative to COVID-19, the good news is that we're gathering data and learning a lot about coronavirus very quickly. And so that piece we actually can start to measure and project quantitatively with some level of certainty as we're moving forward. The piece that is really hard to understand and to measure is that mental health side of things, and sort of the, you know, when you're balancing the consequences of different policy choices, sort of understanding that mental health side of things in terms of the mental health impact of social isolation and so forth, I think that's a really important thing to feed forward to policymakers up at the state level. And so I definitely want to encourage people to participate and share that experience so that policymakers can be informed. So thank you, Crystal, for bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if this came through as Pete and I were crossing wires in the virtual meeting world, but we will make sure that a link to that survey is shared for people, so you can both take it and share it with others as well. And I will follow up with Lori Humiston to send it to her directly as well, given it's so tied to the comment that she shared with us earlier this evening. So we'll move into time just for any information and or questions members of the board would like to share with each other. So we will start with Paula, who will pass it on from there.
Say that one more time, Crystal.
This is basically the all call. Any questions or comments board members want to share with each other?
I just want to say that even though we haven't talked about it today, we have been thinking very deeply about what's going on in our cities, in our state, and for all of those people paying attention and watching, please don't think that we are not thinking about this. We are just really having, I guess, conversations individually with other people in the community, but we have plans to really make a space to determine how our district moves forward. And I just want to send all my love to our students and our teachers. And it's been rough 3 months, and we made it to the end of the school. And it's a lot, but I just want to say that we're here, that I'm really sorry, and just really that we are not ignoring the topic. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
So I would second Paula's statement. It has been a rough end to the school year for everybody, for a lot of people. Besides that, I just have one other thing for information for the board. We've had 2 project oversight committee meetings since our last meeting. One I wasn't able to make it to, but one of the things we discussed in the other one that I think probably everybody has thought about and is related to Tim's questions about when projects are wrapping up. But one of the things we discussed is carefully planning where we are when classes start back up, so that we don't have issues with classrooms having to be pulled together at the last minute, so that we're mindful of how we're setting up our projects so that we are wrapping up, so that teachers have time to get into their classrooms and we have kind of a good start to our school year, when hopefully we are able to be in our buildings in the fall. So I just wanted to put that out there because it was something that we discussed, and I know it was a challenge at the start of last year. So that is it, Mr. Paulus.
I have nothing to share but echo Paula's comments. It's really difficult to be 2020 is a year that our seniors and really everyone will remember for a long time, and it's really hard to have it occur when we are so distant from our students. So I echo Paula. We are thinking about them a lot and often, and hope they realize that if they need us for anything, they can certainly reach out to us. There's still ways of contacting us, and the support still exists for them if they need them. Ms. Smishek.
Thank you, Paula. I think that was really well said. So I have nothing to add. Mr. Tensing.
So I will echo everyone else's comments, and I will pass it off to Chair Brockie. This has obviously been a challenging time, and to be frank, I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do, proud of our whole community, and proud of Richfield. So, you know, I think that's important to state too. As hard as it's been, there's a lot to be proud of. Chair Brackey.
Thank you. There are two things that I wanted to share. First, to just build off of Paola's initial comment, I think, you know, we are committed to pursuing racial justice as a district and to showing what our values actually are in terms of action. And so I think there are a lot of things that we can say right now, but what ultimately matters are the changes that we make, the policies that we implement, and the actual experiences of our students, of our staff, and of our entire community in our public school. So I just hope that people will hear that commitment and hold us to it for the long term, because this is long-term work that we need to do around issues of racial justice and around the experiences of our Black students in our buildings in particular, given what is happening in our society at large. The second thing I wanted to share, and this is a very celebratory note, is that the class of 2020 graduation video is making its official premiere, I believe, Saturday at 7 p.m. It will be live streamed on our YouTube channel, and then will of course be available, excuse me, for viewing after that. The graduation program is available on the website already if you want a sneak peek of what the video is going to include. So I hope all of us here on the board, as well as the broader Richfield community, can watch and can celebrate our graduating seniors and our high school team for the work that has gone into making this possible. Okay, we have our next meeting, and again, this is an added meeting on Monday, June 29th at 7 o'clock p.m., where I think we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about really important topics, including, as we discussed earlier, our school resource officers at the high school and the middle school and their work. Finally, are there any additional items that board members would like to request for discussion on an upcoming agenda? Feel free to come off mute and share those now. Okay, I don't see anything. So one last chance, Superintendent Yanowski, is there anything that you would like to add or share before we bring the meeting to a close?
Just a reminder to board members, Chair Brackey and Vice Chair Paulus are working on superintendent evaluation, and so we will be doing that as a meeting and then following up with a closed session in one of the next couple of meetings to continue that overall evaluation process.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to every single board member for having completed their evaluation on time, along with all of Steve's direct reports. It's hugely helpful and an important part of the process, so thank you. With that, the final item of business on the agenda is to adjourn. Since this does not require a full board vote, I will officially adjourn the meeting as board chair at 9:18 p.m. Have a good evening, everyone, and we will see you here again on June 29th at 7 o'clock p.m. Thank you.